Hello, good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us this hot afternoon in Lagos. And so we will kick off right now, Pippa, if that's fine. We'll be kicking off right now. It's 5 minutes past the hour, and we have a sizable number. And so good afternoon once again from here in Lagos, Nigeria, and warm greetings as always. My name is Victor Mark Onyegbu, and I am the grants lead at African No Filter. So I oversee our arts and culture and media sector programming and grant making. That's quite a long one. And I'll be moderating this event, so you need to get used to this face. You'll see me for the next 1 hour. Actually, this feels like a bit of deja vu for me because I sat right here welcoming you all to our first ANF Academy webinar at about same time, roughly 2 years ago. Did the same thing last year, and this is 2023. We are kicking off again at about the same time, February. So many thanks to all of those who have kept, the faith, who have sort of remained with us on this journey ever since we started the ANF Academy offers. But I'm also aware that many of you might be joining us for the first time, and so for those who are joining us for the first time, I crave your indulgence for a bit of introductions. We usually do this for the benefit of people like you, and then we'll dive right into the business of the day, if that's fine. So I would like to introduce African No Filter first of all. We are a Pan-African non-profit organization funded through a donor collaborative of 10 core funders and counting. And our mission is really to shift stereotypical and harmful narratives within and about Africa. And we do this through research, grant making, building the community of narrative change makers, and advocacy. Our objective is to build the field of narrative change makers by supporting storytellers, investing in media platforms, and driving disruption campaigns in such a way that the ecosystem is sufficiently empowered to continue driving this mission over time. One of the ways we build the ecosystem is through our ANF Academy programs, which is why we are all gathered here today. Um, our programs at ANF Academy are typically geared towards exposing storytellers to new knowledge, connecting them to more resources and opportunities, and ultimately equipping them with the right tools to sustain their creative enterprises, because we believe that ultimately creative enterprises need to thrive for storytelling to continue and to be sustainable. This year, we are kicking off with a fireside chat on how to produce an Oscar Award winning documentary with none other than Pippa Ehrlich. Pippa is right here on the screen. She is the co-writer, editor, and director of My Octopus Teacher, produced in 2020, South Africa's first original Netflix documentary, which went on to win an Academy Award for the Best Documentary Feature in 2021. Ehrlich graduated with a bachelor's in journalism in 2009, specializing in television, and then began her career as a researcher and production assistant at Flying Fish Productions. Here, she helped produce several award-winning investigative television pieces for Carte Blanche. Carte Blanche is an investigative TV news program. It has been running since 1988 and behind some of the biggest exposés in South Africa. She also worked as a conservation journalist and media coordinator for the Save Our Seas Foundation. Her work specialized in the field of marine science and conservation, with a particular interest in the intersection between people and the natural world. She's currently with the Sea Change Project based in Cape Town, South Africa. They are a community of scientists, storytellers, journalists, and filmmakers who are dedicated to protecting South Africa's marine environment. Very important. It is here that Pippa spearheaded My Octopus Teacher. Ehrlich continues to explore the underwater forests off the coast of Cape Town and works tirelessly for the conservation of our oceans as editor of Sea Change, Primal Joy, and the Art of Underwater Tracking. She's involved in yet another project that has attracted the attention of celebrities, conservationists, and scientists, and has already received multiple international awards. This book charts a rediscovery of sea forest life with text and photographs of Lucia's beauty. All right, so that's Pippa Ehrlich in a nutshell. Kudos once again, and congratulations on all the awards that you've swept with this amazing project. I will start with the descriptions by Angie Driscoll at the Hot Dogs Film Festival, where she said, "This beautiful record of an animal's entire life, something seldom achieved in the wild, let alone underwater, was shot over a full year and explores the habits and personality of a strange undulating creature that most of us have only ever eaten. Beyond intelligent, dexterous, and resilient, the cephalopod shares her secret world with Foster as they develop a touching bond. The underwater encounters are literally breathtaking as Foster holds his breath while interacting with the octopus." My question, Pippa, is why did you choose yourself, of course, and the rest of the team? Why did you choose to tell a story about the octopus? Were you trying to address a knowledge gap about them specifically, or draw attention to wildlife conservation more broadly, or were you just working on passing a different kind of message?
I think the stories kind of present themselves to you. Firstly, thank you everyone for being here. I feel very honored to be talking to you, and thank you, Victor, for having me. So I've been working in conservation journalism and communication for a really long time, and I was quite frustrated with how that narrative was shared. And I felt like a lot of how we tell stories about nature and conservation and the destruction of our planet is very, very negative, obviously, and very based in the world of head and facts. And I suppose what I've seen from my time as a storyteller is that people are moved not by information, but by strong emotional stories. And when I heard Craig's story about this experience he'd had with the octopus, I was just so moved, and I was really excited because I thought this is an opportunity to tell a story about someone who has the same relationship with nature to what I do. And I think, and a very, very positive relationship with the natural world, which is, I think that's a really powerful starting point for when we look at actually what's happening on our planet and what's happening to the natural world. It all comes from how do we relate to nature in the first place. So that's why I made the film. It certainly wasn't about octopuses. It was very much more about how human beings see themselves within the great universe of people and nature.
Yeah, how we relate with nature as human beings. Interesting. I would like to encourage everyone to please put your questions in the Q&A. You can use the chat to say hi and hello and where you're coming or you're joining us from, but put your questions in the Q&A box. I'll be picking the questions up from the Q&A box in a short while. Okay. Thanks, Pippa. When I watched the documentary, and I guess this will probably be the feeling any other person would have, you cannot help but think about the efforts, the amount of work, the technicalities that went into this. I mean, this is filming underwater. It's amazing. The Hollywood Reporter described it as a dazzling technical achievement, especially when you consider that the team were faced with 3,000 hours of footage shot over a period of 8 years that began long before Foster encountered the octopus. Can you give us a sense of the amount of work that went into directing this film and how challenging this project has been for you and the rest of the team?
Yeah, I mean, it was a very long process and a very challenging process. So I came on, but by the time I came onto the project, it had already been filmed by Craig, and Craig films everything because he still dives every day. For anyone who doesn't know, that the film's about this man who's he was a filmmaker. He completely lost his passion for filmmaking and thought he'd never pick up a camera again until he started diving in this place that he'd been diving in since he was a child, and it just re-inspired him. And he did pick up a camera, and his mind was blown and his heart was opened. And to this day, he still dives every day and films every day.
Wow.
So when I met Craig, and I think we kind of had been diving together for about 6 months because he'd been teaching me to track animals underwater, which was something I was very interested in at the time.
Oh, you dive as well. You dive too.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I mean, that's how I got into this. And I've been diving for a long time, but now my diving is very focused on Cape Town and the kelp forest, and most of the work that I do is orientated around telling stories about this beautiful place, the Great African Sea Forest, which I now know very, very well. But at the time when I started the film, I was just starting, my eyes were just starting to open.
Yeah.
So we arrived, I mean, when I arrived, there were hard drives full of footage, and Craig is a very accomplished cinematographer. So he shoots really, really beautifully. So that was the first thing. I mean, for him, he doesn't wear a wetsuit and he doesn't use scuba gear. So that's quite a feat. Yeah, to be able to shoot like that is very impressive. But then a very good friend of his who he's made films with before is a guy called Roger Horrocks, and Roger is a complete master underwater cinematographer. He works for the BBC. He used to be the BBC Natural History Unit, but now he's working on Netflix shows and Apple shows. And he shoots on big red cameras, and he has a rebreather. And he really is one of the top guys in the world at underwater cinematography. Then you get into the edit, and I had quite a lot of editing experience on short films, but I'd never cut something as long as this. And how the process worked was we got together, we cut an assembly, Craig and I, with input from his wife and other people on our team. We went to a company called Off the Fence, which are a natural history specialist distribution and production company. And they really, really helped us. They helped us get the film into a much better shape. And they brought on James Reed, who's my co-director, who helped to do an interview with Craig, because something you learn very quickly as a documentary filmmaker is the closer you become to your subject, the better you get to know each other, the harder it can be to interview someone. Because particularly for the format required for this film, we needed it to feel like Craig was telling us the story for the very first time. And that's how it feels in the film. But when I asked him those questions, he knew I already knew the answers. So he told the story in a very different way. And James Reed is a very accomplished filmmaker, much more experienced than I have. He's kind of come up in the world of Bristol natural history filmmaking, so his expertise were incredible. And then you throw in our sound designer, Barry Donnelly, who's been working as a sound engineer for, it must be about 20-30 years now. One of the top guys. He's now moved to London, but he was in Cape Town, but he's worked on many Netflix shows and Hollywood movies, as well as documentaries. Another editor, Dan Schwalm. We even had a consulting editor, which is quite unusual, but this very, very experienced and accomplished woman called Jinx Godfrey, who helped us to refine the project even more. Yeah. So I think it's, technically it was a massive challenge, and it was not what started off as a very local South African team quite quickly became international when people realized that this was a film they wanted to get involved in. And that was very helpful, because it just meant that the intellectual capacity in our team was growing. And it's useful to have, particularly if you want to make something that's international, it's very helpful to have international perspectives. Yeah, because I think when you're in South Africa, you don't always understand the American market the way. Yeah, so that was useful. I mean, I don't know if I've answered the question.
Yeah, you have. I mean, it was
Yeah,
a huge, humongous project.
it was a
And that
humongous project.
yeah, and
Yeah, and so to give
we
you a
can all
time
see that.
scale, it was like a couple of years of filming before I even got there. 2.5 years of editing and
Wow.
getting to the point of a rough cut before
Wow.
we got any money from a buyer.
Wow.
So
Wow.
off the fence invested a little bit, but just enough to kind of fly us to Amsterdam so we could work together, or
Yeah.
bring James Reed on and bring an editor on to cut the new rough cuts. But
Yeah.
for the most part, it was self-funded and supported by Sea Change Foundation, which is the organization behind it. I lived on a stipend. We the first time we ever got money into our bank accounts from Netflix was 2.5 years into the process of working every single day, 14, 16-hour days. Yeah.
How did you pitch the film to Netflix?
I think we tried to pitch it early on, but what you discover quite quickly when you've made a film about a man who makes friends with an octopus is it's not an easy story to pitch.
Yeah.
It was something that people needed to see in order to buy into.
Yeah. Yeah.
So once we had like a really good rough cut that we were happy with, we sent that to them, and that's how we got their buy-in.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we were far down the road at that point, and it's very
Yeah.
nerve-wracking because you've invested so much time and energy, and you have used every bit of money in your bank account,
That's right.
and you just got to pray that someone likes what you've made.
It's
Yeah,
quite a risk.
it's a big risk.
Yeah, very big one. There are a couple of questions coming in already. There's a question about what kept you going when you faced hard times, what kept you motivated. And I think I will probably just take a couple of questions and then you give your answers across them so we can move a bit quickly. Is there a
Cool.
bearing in the quality? So there's a question around if there is a bearing in the quality of camera one uses when filming documentary.
Okay, so I'll answer. So the first question about the motivation.
Yeah.
This was kind of a magical film for me and a magical experience for me, and I was working with amazing people, number one, and number two, it was like, when you wake up in the morning and you've just got something to do and you're so excited to be doing it, that you just feel like you're doing what you're meant to be doing, and that was hugely motivating. And I was questioning it a lot, because when you are starting to struggle financially and you're being rejected by all the streamers, because we were rejected many times before anyone bit, you do question yourself. But when you're surrounded by people who believe in the project, that's really helpful. When you are surrounded by people who are more experienced than you and can continue to encourage you, that's really helpful. And then the biggest thing is to just really believe in what you're doing, because filmmaking is very hard. So if you're doing something that you are not 100% passionate about, it's going to be difficult to carry on when you meet the inevitable roadblocks that you'll meet. And then with regards to cameras, it's helpful to have a really good camera, but the truth is, in documentary filmmaking, if you've got a shot of something that's incredible, that no one else has, that's authentic and mind-blowing, it doesn't matter what camera it's shot on. I just made a big film with a big budget, and 80% of the film is high 8 video diaries from the 1980s. Most of it's 3x4.
Wow.
So if you've got an incredible story, it doesn't matter what it was shot on.
Yeah. Cool. Thanks for letting us know. There's a question which I guess you might have answered already. How did you get funding from pre-production to post-production? You talked about Sea Change, and then eventually Netflix came on board when you had your rough cuts, right?
Yeah. So it was largely self-funded by Craig in the the early phases, and then because we were part of an NGO essentially, and they believed in the project, they gave me a stipend to live on. but I would say pre-production was not funded. I don't even think production was funded.
Yeah.
It was really, we were very, very lucky that it all worked out the way it did. And I suppose I was lucky that Craig believed in me, and he had the resources at the time to invest his own money into the story.
Yeah. Cool. The last question, which was around the camera type, right? I know there's also the sentiment that it's really about the story and not the type of equipment and all, right? And there's always that argument. But the issue here might be around the platforms like Netflix and VOD platforms and others, streaming platforms. Sometimes they do have requirements like specificities. You know, you've got to shoot with a 4K picture quality and stuff like that. How do you reconcile that with the need to have, you know, just to focus on your story as against focusing on the cameras and equipment that you need to meet up with the standards where you can then begin to market or make your product attractive to platforms?
So those rules generally apply if they commission the film.
Okay.
So if they commission you to make something, you're going to have to shoot it on the cameras that they require. But if you go to them with an archive of footage and it's really, really meaningful footage, it doesn't matter what it was shot on. They will buy that archive from you. And then possibly any filming that you do from that point onwards, you'll have to do on Netflix accepted cameras. But the rules are different when it's an archive project. And by the way, at least I would say only 30% of Octopus Teacher was filmed on a RED. And then we had a RED and we had an FS7, and those are both accepted by Netflix, but a lot of our film was GH5, a small Sony camera, and a very small underwater camera. At least 30% was this tiny little underwater camera.
Yeah.
And it looks amazing. And you can't, you know, a lot of the time you can't tell the difference between that and the RED. And it's because if you've captured animal behavior that nobody else has captured, it doesn't matter what camera you filmed it on.
Yeah, it's unique. It's a unique story, authentic and unique.
Yeah.
That's right. Cool. Thank you so much, Pippa. There's a question around, I'll take 2 or 3 questions. They're quite short, so I can put them together. How was your life changed after winning the Oscar? Okay, and the next is, does it cost a lot to do this? A sense of the budget. If you could give a sense, either precise figures or just a sense of the budget for shooting something like this.
So how's my life changed? My life is completely different to where it was before. And it's an incredible gift, but also sometimes a bit of a curse, because it can be quite overwhelming. And you can imagine when you just kind of a normal person living your life in a little village on the tip of Africa. And then suddenly you're getting hundreds of emails a day, and people want to do interviews with you, and people are offering you projects. And this was my first big film. So, you know, there's something to be said for gaining experience slowly over a longer period of time.
Yeah.
So that by the time you become very successful, you feel very confident in that. I've had to do a lot of playing catch up. I've had to deal with quite a lot of imposter syndrome. But on the plus side, our organization has managed to find funding now, which wasn't the case. I've been able to really get my teeth into some really fascinating and exciting new film projects. And one of the most amazing things is you suddenly meet filmmakers who are incredibly accomplished and in all parts of the world, and they want to work with you, and then you can really start to learn quickly and upskill yourself. So that's super exciting. I forgot the other question, sorry.
The other question was around a sense of the budget.
Oh yeah, so filmmaking is expensive. I mean, like I said, we got Octopus Teacher to a very advanced stage on a very small budget. but then you've spent so much time making the thing that you've got a lot of costs to recoup.
Yeah.
So, and I don't know what I think budgets for kind of a smallish film in the European market that gets shown on a channel like ZDF, which is a German public broadcaster. I think for that you're looking at like 350,000 euros, say.
Wow.
Probably and I don't. These are just numbers I'm throwing out. I don't have the exact answers.
Yeah.
Like an entry level sort of Netflix budget for a feature would probably be around $1 million, but you know that's going that goes up. You get feature docs with budgets of $4 or $5 million. You get documentary films that involve celebrities, where just your budget for the celebrity can be a couple of $1 million. So it's sort of how long's a piece of string, and it's not. I think I wouldn't let those numbers live in your head and you say, oh, I can't make a film unless I have $1 million, because that's absolutely not true. We made a film on a tiny fraction of that, you know, and then we managed to find someone who wanted to buy it, if that makes sense. So it's much easier when you have the money up front. Like, and that's when someone said, how's your life changed? That's been an incredible thing. To actually have support and be able to work with people and not carry everything yourself from the beginning of the project. That's incredible. But you can do it on a small budget.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thank you so much. There are a couple of other questions here. How did you get to the point of believing in the project enough to take on it as a director? Then there's another question around, if you could make a checklist of what to look out for in a good story, what would that be?
Okay, so I can't really tell you. I just believed in this project. I read the treatment. I started crying. I felt like my heart was going to burst out of my chest, and I was just like, it was so strong, and it was completely intuitive. And what makes a good story? And I mean, I knew it was a good story because we had a very good character, two very good characters, and I knew that we were showing octopuses in a way that nobody had really seen them before or thought about them before, and that's always intriguing. And I knew quite a lot about them. It is just a fascinating creature, and it's a surprising creature. Plus, I knew we had a natural environment that was really beautiful, that people hadn't been exposed to before. And then I guess, I think storytelling, I think you can break the rules, and it's important to break the rules, but there is a basic thing when it comes to a story, and it's got to have a beginning, a middle, and end. It's got to have a character or characters that go on a journey and face many challenges and are forced to grow and evolve because of those challenges. And I think that's what good storytelling is about. You can't just throw a lot of facts at someone. And you can't have, you've got to be careful of having too many characters in your story. It really is about an emotional journey, a good story. And really, where you want your audience to walk into the film at the beginning and then be sucked inside of it until you let them out again at the end.
Cool. There are a couple of interesting questions here. What were some of the big lessons from the production of the film? And after such an incredible story, how do you find stories today? I guess we can take this question alongside another one that says, how do you find authentic stories? And so the first question is, what are some of the big lessons from the production? And then how do you find stories?
So many lessons. I think what we spoke about, the first thing is, don't make a film unless you are, don't 100% behind it, because it's very difficult. You know, I mean, everyone has to make a living, so sometimes you've got to make choices based on that. But if you're going to pour your whole heart into something, and that's what's required if you want a really good film, then make sure it's something that you believe in. What else did I learn? I learned that filmmaking is a team sport. 100%. You know, you might be the director, but you're only a small part of the process. And to surround yourself with people you can trust, and people who have a similar sensibility to you, because it's a really extraordinary experience to move as a team through the process of making a film. You become a family by the end. And it's good to have different perspectives within that team. It's good to work with people who come from different places, because it forces you to interrogate what you're making, and it forces you to question yourself and really make sure that you're making the right decisions every time. And it's important to listen to other voices. What other big lessons did I learn? I think a certain amount of naivety is important when it comes to making films, because it is very hard, and you've got a good chance of burning yourself out and having your heart broken. But you have to take those risks, otherwise you'd never start.
Yep, very true.
And mentorship. That's maybe the biggest thing, and I think that's particularly when we're in Africa. What I've seen, I'm just finishing a film in London at the moment, and I've been in all these big studios, and I've just got a sense of how the industry works here. And like, if you want to come and become a filmmaker in London, you start as a runner, you know, and you go and you get people coffee, and then you go from being a runner to maybe managing a sound studio, and you sit all day and you watch someone doing sound. And it takes a long time to work your way up the ladder. And I imagine that can be quite frustrating, but you get incredible experience, and you meet people along the way who will help you and guide you and believe in you. And what I experienced in South Africa in the early part of my career is I didn't know where to begin. I had no idea. I didn't know, especially for natural history filmmaking at that point, I didn't know who to speak to. I didn't know how to get a job. If I'd known what I know now, I would have moved to the UK and started off in Bristol, which is like the center of natural history filmmaking. But I think it's changing a lot now, and there are more and more and more opportunities opening to African filmmakers. And there's a growing hunger for stories from Africa told by Africans, and that's very exciting. But within that, because it's harder for us to gain that experience early in our careers, it's really important to make connections with people who are more experienced than you, possibly in other parts of the world, who can guide and mentor you. And I think if there are kind of grant opportunities or scholarship opportunities or fellowships to go and get experience in other parts of the world, where you'll get exposed to people like that, those opportunities, like, you should jump on, and with a degree of humility as well, because the more I'm exposed to people who are much better than I am at filmmaking, the more I realize like how little I know, and where my strengths are and where my weaknesses are, and you know, to just be grateful when someone offers to teach you something.
There's a follow-up question to that about where do you get authentic stories? I guess you've touched on that a little bit, but there's also another question quite similar to that, which is, does the choice of a voiceover artist make a difference in the production? And what specific challenges did you have with filming an octopus, the octopus itself?
So most of the octopus I mean, the octopus had died by the time I was involved. So those challenges were
Oh,
Craig's. And it was very challenging. And I don't think there are many other people who could ever make a film like this, because it literally required going into the ocean every single day and filming the same octopus every single day for more than a year.
wow.
So you have to be good at diving. You have to have a camera that you can take with you every day that's not too heavy and bulky. You have to be able to hold your breath. You have to be interested in octopuses, otherwise you'll just get too bored. And you have to know how to find them.
Hmm.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I think that's the challenge with this film, but I think that's quite a unique situation. And there are many wildlife filmmakers who will follow the same line for years.
Hmm. Yeah. It's quite a
Yeah.
patient. Demands a lot
Yeah.
of patience,
and
really.
and passion.
Yeah, and passion. Yeah.
Yeah.
You've got to
Yeah.
believe in it. Hmm.
You've got to, and you've got to be curious
Yeah,
about what you're documenting. It takes a huge
that's
amount
right.
of curiosity.
Yeah. How, there's a question around the voiceover. What's your thoughts
Oh,
about that? Yeah.
so I've never really made a film with a voiceover. Interestingly, I'm looking at a series now where we're going to have a narrator. But there was lots of debate with my octopus teacher. I mean, in earlier renditions of the film, we just had Craig's voice without
Okay.
any like interview to camera, and it didn't work at all. And I think, and this is something to think about when we come from Africa. Uh, if you, I guess, if as a South African, if I want to make a film for a South African audience, it's no problem to have like voice of God narration for a South African film. But for an international film, you have to start thinking about accents. And if the biggest audience is America, you've got to think, okay, what kind of accent is an American audience going to be able to watch? And I don't know the answer to that. And maybe it's not a problem. But more and more, it seems to me that the industry is moving away from narration. You know, that more and more we're going into a space of character-driven narrative.
Yeah.
Rather than a narrator, you're working with interview, and you're
Yeah.
constructing your story from interview, or even from live action footage and
Yeah.
things that have already happened.
Hmm. Yeah, that's right. A few more questions. Somebody's asking about the story structure of the editing process. I guess you understand what that means, because I
Yes.
don't. And then there's another question. How do we get considerate archive footage if we don't have $3,500 per minute for archives from well-known broadcasters?
Okay, so the first question about story structure is a great
Yeah.
question. Um, I mean, I think we've all, like, even in school when you study literature, you study the basic format of what is a good story, and you know it's got a beginning, a middle, and an end. You have to introduce your character. Your character has to go on a journey and face struggles on that journey, and then come to some kind of resolution. So when I look at creating an assembly for a film, which is like just basically your very broad outline, I get the most basic structure down. And sometimes you'll be creative about it from the beginning if you have a clever idea. But generally, I think it's better to just get your story working, and just stack people in so that there are highs and lows, and there's an emotional journey. And then once you know that that's working, you can start playing around with the structure, and finding more surprising ways of telling the story.
Yeah.
Yeah. What was the other question? Oh, I forgot. Sorry.
The other question was about the amount of money that needs to be paid
Oh,
to get archival footages from broadcasters. Is there a way
I
to go
guess
around that?
it depends what you're doing, but you know, so for the first thing is, until your film is funded, you can use that archive. You can put it in your rough cut, make the film, and then raise the money that you need to pay for the archive. So you only pay for the archive once you finish the film, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
If you end up with a budget that doesn't cover that archive, it would depend how generic it is. You know, if you're making a film for educational purposes, then maybe you can write to them and ask for a lower rate. People are generally very negotiable on archive rates.
Yeah.
And then there are free archive places. If you're looking for generic stuff, in the same way that you can subscribe to a music library online, you can subscribe to a footage library, and then you just pay a monthly fee, and you can take as much footage out of there as you want. But if you've got a good story and the archive is really important, and someone likes your story, they'll pay for the archive.
Yeah.
You don't need to pay for it when you've got it in a rough cut, if that helps.
Yeah.
Only when you're broadcasting it.
Yeah.
Or putting it on the internet. Yeah.
Very well. Thanks, Pippa. Someone is also asking if the financial rewards gained at the end make up for the expenses you incurred during production. I guess the answer is yes, otherwise you wouldn't be smiling. So, but you feel free to respond to that question. But let me also ask you this in addition to that. How did you manage to get the production team together, you know, that are passionate about the story? And how was that experience of just bringing people together who are passionate and willing to, you know, sacrifice time and all working for this?
Look, what I was very lucky that I was working with an established filmmaker who'd worked with many people who people trusted. Craig is an incredible person to work with, and people loved collaborating with him. So he's very good at getting people on board. And, you know, the two of us started as this little unit with support from his wife and with support from our team at Sea Change. And then we talked to our composer, Kevin, about the film, and he got really excited, and he did a little bit of work for free in the beginning. And then Roger Horrocks got really excited, and he did a little bit more work for free. And it's really, once you start doing good work and you're doing something people believe in, then they will generally help you. And for us, it was really organic, the way the team came together. I think it was very lucky. This film had a magic that drew people in, but projects that I'm looking at now, where the finance is there from the beginning, you just want to work with people who you know you'll collaborate well with. So you want to look at their work and say, I really like this person's work, but you also want to enjoy the process of working together. And that becomes a personality thing. And if you work with someone and you get to know them and you realize, wow, I can really trust this person, then that's amazing. And then you work together on another film in the future.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So that's how it works. And with regards to financial reward, I mean, Octopus Teacher, we spent so long. You know, you've racked up a lot of costs by the end of that. So I would say from the actual sale of the film, the financial reward wasn't great. But because it was a good film, the opportunities that came later made up for that exponentially, if that makes sense. So if you can create something really good that can become your calling card, even if it's not a financial success, that is going to open doors for you that you never imagined. So it's important not to be too focused on profits.
Yeah.
At the beginning, you want to focus on creating something where you can be like, this is what I'm going to use to show people what I'm capable of.
Yeah. Thank you. We've got just a few more minutes, and I'm quite mindful of that. But we've also got very, 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 very exciting questions. I can see, and I just can't, like, they can't be ignored, right? So let's see how quickly we can. I've got a question here that says, what have you learned as a producer after working on this project that you wish you knew before now? Right? So what are those things you've learned as a result of this that you wish you had known about before? Do you have a list of what to avoid when telling a story that touches on issues that there seems to be public apathy to, maybe because of lack of understanding of the issues. So what are those things to look out for
Okay.
when you're telling stories that feel like the people may not be so much interested in?
So I think that's a very interesting question. In a way, I think telling environmental stories can be difficult because there's a lot of apathy, because there's so much that's being thrown at people all the time. And I looked at Octopus Teacher, and I really was very conscious about telling the story in a way that didn't do anything that caused people to turn off. And we could have made it into a more obvious impact film. There was a whole narrative about octopus fisheries in South Africa and the number of octopus that they were killing and the fact that whales were getting entangled. And we could have gone down that road.
Yeah.
But I decided not to, because I wanted to create something that everyone in the world could relate to, and that wouldn't cause polarization. So yeah, I think if it's something that people are, so there's a difference between apathy and there's a difference between confronting. There's some issues that people don't want to engage with because it's too triggering. There are many things in our society that people just don't want to look at, and then there are other things that maybe you just don't care about. But so then I can't give you a list of what not to do, but I would just say, look at why that message is failing to get through and try and approach it from a different angle. Because if you try and do it the same way other people have done it before and it hasn't worked in the past, it's unlikely that you're going to be able to make it work. So find a different way in.
Yeah. Cool. There's a question around, do you need a complete script and storyboard before making a documentary?
No, generally it's impossible to have that because the story has to unfold. It helps if you have a good sense, if you've got a nice archive and you have a good sense of where the story's going, and then that's good. And it's nice to be able to map it out, but you'll never have a complete script because you don't know what your interviewees are going to say. You don't know what the resolution is going to be. So you just need to know that you've got a good character and a good problem that they're trying to solve.
Yeah. Cool. We've got survey questions, which will come up right after my next question. I'll be asking one or two more questions. I'm mindful of the time, and after which you would see a very short survey pop up on the screen. And please do indulge us. Take a few seconds to just read through very short, simple questions. And let's just get your feedback before we begin to wrap up, right? There's a question here, Pippa, on how do you direct a natural history documentary? How do you direct a natural history doc? Was it mainly led off the footage that Craig had, or did you have to also bring out new ideas and perspectives to fulfill your end goal? And do you have any tips for those who would like a natural history, who would like to become natural history directors or producers?
Yes, that's a great question. So mostly in this case, the story was led by the footage that Craig had, because that story had already unfolded. But we did try to think of it from different perspectives. For example, there's a scene where the octopus is hunting crabs and lobsters. And so we went in and we got real close-ups of the lobster's eyes and the crab's claws. And you want to take people into that animal's world. And you want to think of different viewpoints. In that case, I mean, a lot of natural history filmmaking comes from reading scientific papers about amazing research that's being done and amazing behaviors that are being discovered. That's how a lot of the research in the natural history world happens. And then you find out about this thing, you research everything, you get hold of the scientists, and then you go out there and you try to capture it. In terms of advice, there's amazing stuff happening in Africa at the moment in the wildlife space. I think National Geographic is offering grants, Wildscreen is offering grants. There's an organization called NUF, the Nature and Environment Wildlife Filmmaking Congress, I think it is. They're doing amazing stuff in the underwater space and the terrestrial space. So it's opening up now. And what COVID's done is it has forced international production companies to see the value of working with local teams.
Thank you so much. I think we're doing quite well with the time. The poll questions have been on the screen for a while, and so please do take a few seconds to answer the question. Pippa, can we take perhaps another 1-2 questions? We could just group them together.
Sure.
I'm pretty sure we can't go around because we've got lots and lots of questions that we are yet to answer, but let's see how much we can do with the last batch of questions, and then we can always direct people to our website to watch the recording. Some of the questions that I'm seeing now have probably been touched upon in the earlier conversations. There's a question about what do you need to know to get the attention of Amazon or Netflix? I think you touched on this a little bit, so I'll ask 2 or 3 other ones to join this. Was the goal of the film to be seen by an international audience from the beginning, or did the interests come about with the more people who came on board? So who did you have in mind? Which audience did you have in mind originally when you set out for this project?
The biggest audience we could
the biggest
find.
audience possible. So African, Europe, but of course there are nuances, right? There are audience nuances. So did you take all of that into consideration? There are peculiarities of the different audiences. So how did you navigate?
We tried to make a story that was as universal as possible. And the thing about storytelling is there are some things that are true to every single human in the world, no matter where you live. You care about your children. You care about having purpose in your life. You care about having a sense of belonging. You care about feeling happy and safe in the world. And those are themes that will be true no matter where you go. And that's something to really think about when you want to tell a story that will reach people from a different culture and a different place in the world. Everybody loves their kids and wants to be the best parent they can be, for example.
Okay, last questions. How do you decide when your story has ended? One, and just keep that in mind. Then the very last one is, did you have a treatment or short list before you started filming, given that it's a nature documentary and many aspects of it were uncertain? So those will be the last.
Yes, we had a treatment. And the treatment we also had an archive already, but you want to be able to write you should be able to write your story down in 1 page, and it should make sense, and you should have a really good sense of what you're telling. And actually in like sequence driven blue chip natural history, everything is storyboarded before they send the teams out into the field. Cameramen know exactly what they're going to shoot because they're generally shooting kind of predictable wildlife behavior. So it's actually easier to predict than a film about what's going to happen in Ukraine, for example. That's impossible to predict. What was the other question?
The other question was around if you had a treatment shot.
No, I answered that one.
Okay, you answered that one.
Yeah.
I think the other one was, how do you decide when the story has ended, especially for long-term productions?
Well, you might run out of time and money if you're filming over years and years and years. But I think you'll know when the story's ended, because I think something will happen that'll give you a feeling like, okay,
we can end it at this point.
Yeah, I feel happy, like leaving my character and their journey here. I feel like this is a good place to say goodbye to them. Yeah, in our case, the octopus died, so it was easy.
Wow. Okay, I also have that feeling that this is a good place to leave our audience, and we have actually come to the end of this. And thank you so much, Pippa. It's been extremely excellent speaking with you and just sort of bringing out all of these insights and knowledge that we couldn't have gotten from anywhere else. And so we're really grateful to you on behalf of African No Filter, on behalf of our community. We're always hungry for information. And so please do oblige us if we come knocking next time. Thanks to all of you who made out time. It's a busy day, it's a weekday, made out time to come join us this afternoon. So thank you so much once again, and all the best.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Cheers. Bye.